But I thought in this opening monologue I would talk about immigration on a practical level because I went through it. Debbie, my wife, and I are both immigrants. We've sort of been through a process. We've grown up in other countries. And I want to talk about how that works, or in some cases doesn't work. Well, in my case, it did work. I came to America as an exchange student, but I wasn't planning to stay here. It's really in college that I fell in love with America and the people of America and the ideas that built America. And I also saw that I could do things with my life in America, like become a writer. Earlier, I had approached my father about the idea of becoming a writer in India. And my dad goes, well, yeah, you sort of can do that, but you're probably going to have to become a chartered accountant or sell insurance, and then you can kind of write on the side. Because writing was not, at that time anyway, at least a serious or developed profession where you could actually think about making a living that way. So I applied for American citizenship. Now, I began the process in 1983, right after I graduated from Dartmouth. Interestingly, I didn't become a citizen until 1991. So it shows you that it's a time-consuming process. And in my case, to go from student visa, to green card, which is to say permanent resident, to citizen, it took 8 years. It's not only time consuming, it costs a lot of money. I had to hire an immigration attorney and go through an elaborate process that cost me, if I remember at that time, $2,000 or $3,000, but it was a great deal of money for me, which I didn't really have. I had to earn it in order to spend it. And it was a very arduous process. In fact, the cost for me wasn't just the cost of the lawyer. It was the cost of having to take a lower paying job with an employer who was willing to sponsor me. So I applied for a job that at that time paid something like $18,000 a year. Seems preposterously low now, I guess. But my employers, when they realized that I needed them to sponsor me, that they had to go through a process, they're like, okay, well, we'll pay you $14,000 or $14,500. So I took a big pay cut because I needed someone who would kind of walk me through the process. And these people had to buy ads in the New York Times advertising the job I was applying for. They had to prove that there was no willing and employable American who would take that job. They had to show that I had a range of skills from writing to editing to fundraising, a familiarity with the Ivy League. This was for a magazine editorship at Princeton. So the bottom line of it is this is the process, and it's not easy. And it's particularly hard when you don't have a lot of money. And you're always at the risk that your time will run out and you'll be basically sent back to your home country. Now, this is the line that immigrants cut. The illegals, they jump ahead of this line. They basically go, here's my starving kid, Biden, let me in. So the idea here is that just because you can show up at the border and produce, you may say, a hard luck story, you're basically claiming priority over all of us. Many of us from distant countries, we don't have a border, we don't have a fence to jump through, but we stand in a very long line, and the line is even longer now than it was when I applied to get in. Now, the other point is that immigrants are a walking refutation of the idea that all cultures are equal. That was one of the silly doctrines that I was taught at Dartmouth. All cultures, Dinesh, are basically equal. No culture is better or worse, superior or inferior to any other. And this was taught to me by the sort of anti-racist. They say this because they think that to say that any culture is better is to give fuel to the idea of racism. But every immigrant knows that they're lying through their teeth. Why? Because we are voluntarily leaving one culture and coming to another. So in that very act, the immigrant is affirming the superiority of some culture, the cultures that they're moving to, and the relative inferiority of their own culture, which they are walking away from. Bottom line of it is cultures that attract people are better. Cultures that people are trying to leave or walk away from are worse. Now, the irony of all this is that we now have this ideology that's being propagandized through the media and through schools, critical race theory. And of course, the premise of critical race theory is that America is horrible. America is deeply racist, and it's not just episodic. It's not just here or there. It's structurally racist. It's built into our institutions. It has been since 1619. And here's my question. If America is so horrible, if it's particularly discriminatory and evil toward blacks and other minorities, black and brown people, why are the black and brown people trying to come to America? Haven't they been able to read all these critical race studies analyses that tell them, don't come to America, you're probably better off in your own country, less racism, less structural discrimination, more people who look exactly like you. Evidently, the immigrants know that this is all massive BS. They obviously pay no attention to it at all. And the critical theory people also know it's BS. Why? Because if they really believe their own nonsense, then they would say, we should not allow immigrants into this country. It's very inhuman to take people, particularly brown and black people, and allow them to come to this horrible country. Do Jews try to break into Nazi Germany? No. Why would you? And if Nazi Germany is anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, the Jews are going to stay away. Well, if America is so racist, then presumably the minorities would want to stay away, but they don't want to stay away. And even the critical race theory people are dead silent on this topic, I think because they know deep down that their own ideology is a massive fiction. It's a massive fiction with a political purpose to gain more power, to gain more institutional control, to sort of play a fast one on the American people. But of course, the immigrants are listening and laughing and paying no attention to it and trying really hard to come across the border. And at the very least, what that shows is that America, even for people of color, is still a pretty darn good place to live.